So even though pipeline is over, still one more last slide in pipeline. We already seen that generally the 5-stage pipeline that you see, two portions, that is the instruction fetch portion and the memory access portion, are happening outside the processor. We know that decoding and register fetching or calculation of address, writing back into register, everything happens within the CPU only. And our basic concept by which the pipeline is running, that every stage of the pipeline need to be uniformly balanced. For example, let us imagine that this is going to take roughly 3 nanosecond. This is going to take 2.9 nanosecond. Let's say this is going to take another 2.5 nanosecond. So these two also has to be in and around 3 nanosecond for that the entire clock line to operate with a clock cycle speed of 3. If you look at the conventional memory, our main memory techniques and all, giving an address, reading the contents, what is happening in the IF and MEM stage, will take at least in the order of microseconds. So if that is the case, then we cannot implement a pipeline also, because two of the stages will be heavily dominating in time and others will happen in a fraction of a nanosecond. It is in this context we require a high-speed memory that can match up to the speed of the other stages in the pipeline, and that is what is the role of cache memory all about. And we are using, because we told that due to structural hazard, your instruction and the data cannot be stored in the same memory. That is why we use an I cache and a D cache. So whichever cache, there are different levels of cache, we will learn about it, but whichever levels of cache it is, that level of cache, that hierarchy in the cache memory, which is directly going to be interacting with the pipeline, with the instruction pipeline, need to be very fast, and it has to be separate cache also. One for instruction so that the IF can directly fetch from it, and one for data so that the memory access phase can directly fetch on it. So cache memory is closely tied up with an instruction pipeline. So only if you understand the dynamics of this, what is going to be the latency, it is a latency of the longest unit that is going to govern what is going to be the clock rate of the processor, or what is going to be the clock rate of this instruction pipeline. So cache memory is very much important for an effective implementation of pipeline. Now, in 1990, there was no cache in the microprocessor, and that time the speed of the microprocessor as well as the speed at which cache access latency happens, or the memory access latency happens, were comparable. But over the years, processor performance was increasing, and at the same time, DRAM or the main memory performance was also increasing, but the gap is widening. The rate at which processor access speed has come down is drastically very high when compared to that of DRAM. So because of this widening gap, we need to come up with some technology such that which is at par or very close with the access speed of CPU. And that is the reason that they have found out by SRAM based cells known as caches. So relationship of cache and pipeline, we see that for instruction and data cache, we are going to keep high speed memory, and that's the way how it has been accessed. Now, why cache is faster? Cache memory is built using SRAM. You might have learned about what is SRAM and DRAM techniques. The cache memory is using SRAM, and we use some special logic such that rather than searching in the entire cache memory, we have certain dedicated units by which we can go and find out whether something is present in the cache or not. We will come to know about it. So this is the relationship between cache and the pipeline. So what is the role of memory? Programmers always wanted unlimited amount of very fast memory. And these two terms are really confusing. Unlimited means very large memory. At the same time, the memory should be very fast. These are contradicting requirements. If you go for a large memory, obviously it will be slow. If you go for a fast, and if you go for a slow means a small memory, then it can be really fast. Let me look into the logic, why it is happening, this fast and slow process. Consider I have two memory locations and I'm giving one address. So 1 bit address is more than enough for two memory locations to work on. So if you give the address bit values as 0, then we know that this will be chosen. If the address bit value equal to 1, then the second location will be chosen. So the 2 bits that you are going to use. So essentially you have a decoder. It's a 1:2 decoder. Depending on what is the input in the input line, one of the two locations should be chosen. Similarly, if there are 4 locations, then we use a 2-bit address, and with the help of a 2:4 decoder, we does it. Similarly, what you require is n:2 power n decoder. Now, if you look at the internal logic of decoder with the n inputs, and then if it's going to be m inputs, and you imagine m is going to be larger than n, So here it is going to be 2 power n outputs. Here it is 2 power m outputs. Obviously, this circuit, let us call the first one a circuit Y, which is nothing but a decoder with n inputs. Circuit X is another decoder with m inputs, and let us imagine m is going to be larger than n. Then if you apply the input, your circuit X will take more time to produce an output than circuit X. Essentially, this determines the delay. So the more number of locations are there in the memory, you require a bigger decoder, the effect of which is your access latency would be very high. So when you want unlimited memory or very large memory, naturally you need to use a more bigger decoder. So the indexing time into the decoder and the time at which the decoder is going to give you result is going to be large. So since these are contradicting requirements, architects thought of some other plan. Can we create an illusion of a very large and a fast memory? Create the illusion of a very large and a fast memory. So what do you do? Implement the memory of a computer as a hierarchy. Multiple levels of memory with different speeds are there, and you try to move data or instruction between them. So the entire addressable memory space is available in largest and slowest memory, and keep the smaller and faster memories closer to the processor and the slower and large memory below that. So this is how it looks like, the memory hierarchy. You have a disk storage, you have a main memory, and then you have different levels of cache, and CPU has some registers inside them. So typically registers are of few bytes, and in the order of picoseconds is going to be the access time. Your L1, L2, L3, the number may vary, how many levels of caches are there. They will range from kilobytes all the way to megabytes, with 1 nanosecond somewhat roughly equal to the processor speed, all the way up to the L2 cache with a more clock cycle time. And main memory will be in the order of nanoseconds or microseconds, and obviously disk will be in the order of milliseconds and seconds. So what we are trying to see is, we are going to have a memory hierarchy rather than one memory and processor. We will be having multiple such memory levels, each with having its own access speed, at the same time the storage capacity. So CPU has a register file, and then you have the I cache and D cache. From I cache, CPU is going to only read, that is happening using instruction fetch, and from D cache, it is during the mem stage of instruction pipeline. So both the read and write is performed, because you can perform a load operation and store operation in your D cache, and then you have an L2 is a unified cache, and then you have memories that are being connected together. The main memory is divided into multiple ranks or multiple chunks. So different banks are there, and then let's say there is total of 4 GB, and you have 1 GB each. That's the way how you do, and it is all bidirectional. So this is the way how you do larger like on-chip SRAM, which is known as cache memory, and this is called off-chip DRAM, the other one. Now, what is cache? Cache is a small, fast buffer which is placed between processor and the main memory. Old values will be removed from cache to make space for new values. And cache memory is built with the concept of principle of locality of reference. What do you mean by principle of locality? Programs access a relatively small portion of their address space at any instant of time. That is called principle of locality. I will repeat. Programs access a relatively small portion of their address space at any instant of time. Now, principle of locality has two subcomponents. One is known as temporal locality, other one is known as spatial locality. So what temporal locality say? If an item is referenced, it will be referenced again soon. So you have programs which consist of loops. So the lines inside the loop will be referenced again. So there is programs exhibit high temporal locality because of the presence of these loops and repetition. Certain lines, there is very high probability that it will be referred them again. So what is spatial locality? If an item is referenced, items closer to them will also be referenced. So if I access line number L, adjacent location will also be referred. So these two concepts constitute the principle of locality of reference, which tells that programs access a relatively small portion of their address space at any given point of time. Let us say this is the entire address space of a program. Initially, let's say we are going to work in this section only. Once you move out it, then you have another section. Then you may repeat it again. Like that, at any given point of time, you are going to access only very few portions. So temporal locality say that if I access a location L at time t, then the probability of accessing location L at time t plus delta t is very high probability. Similarly, spatial localities say that if I access location L at time t, then the probability of accessing location L plus delta L at time t plus delta t is very high. This is the way in which temporal and spatial locality concepts are being worked on. Now, if you look at, this is the values that have been taken from a simulator. On the x-axis, you see the clock cycle, and y-axis, you see the address. Let's say the program at this point of time, the addresses that are accessed are between 75,000 to 85,000. Now, we are trying to plot what are the addresses that are being accessed at a given point in time. So let's say this is the clock time and this is the address, somewhere around 78,000, 79,000 I am addressing. After that, I'm sliding. So when you're going up means I am going to higher addresses. So you can see that. Here what happens? I am referring to the same address or the very adjacent address for some time. And this exhibits clearly temporal locality. I am revisiting that. Whereas this exhibits spatial locality. I'm moving into the adjacent addresses. So this is like the pattern that has been printed. Similarly, you can print the same pattern for any program in order to see the temporal and spatial locality behavior of applications. So for applications, the amount of temporal locality and the amount of spatial locality. So this is the way in which your access is happening. So I will repeat once again. When you access the same location again, we call it as temporal locality. When you access the adjacent locations in the near future, we call it a spatial locality, and the programs exhibit temporal locality as well as spatial locality, and that's the way how it has been working. So consider a string where each of the alphabet is going to represent an address. Then Mississippi has lot many words that are being repeated. S and I and P are repeated. So this is a case of temporal locality. And if you go for this, if each of the alphabet represents an address in the order in which it is showing, so A and B are consecutive address, C is the consecutive, like that I can see I am going to the adjacent locations again. And this exhibits spatial locality. So I am sure that you are thorough with the concept of temporal and spatial locality now. So if anyone has any query till this point, feel free to ask. Any queries in the topics covered till now?
Sir, in the slide it is written that we are creating an illusion. So is it just an illusion or actually we are creating a huge memory?
Okay. So thanks Ashwini for the question. So what I mentioned in that slide was programmer always want unlimited memory and very fast memory. Now, how do you do that? We don't have unlimited memory. Memory size is always limited. But how do you create such a feeling? Whatever one programmer should feel that whatever he wanted, still it is available in memory. So we keep memory as a hierarchy where hard disk has huge space, main memory have little smaller space like that, and we intelligently move data and instruction between these memory hierarchies such that there will be always a quality of experience as far as a programmer or a user is concerned. So the term illusion means we are not creating a large and fast big memory. Programmer always try to access the processor always try to access the cache memory, but we kind of move data from the main memory to cache or from disk to main memory in such a way that processor is never complaining that I am taking so much time for every access. That is why it is known as an illusion. Actually, it is not an illusion. It is a technique by which we give the best experience to the programmer such that he feel there is large memory and memory is really fast also.
Yes, sir, I got it now.
Okay. So actually, we don't have a large memory. We have a limited memory, but because of the hierarchy level and intelligent movement of data between the levels, we are getting the benefit of it. Any other questions? Any questions to anyone? Shall I go forward then? Okay. So now, if you look at, you have a main memory. For the time being, now we are talk about CPU, cache, and main memory. The disk portion you will learn in operating system course later, how the disk management in the next semester. So you have CPU, cache, and main memory. Now, in your main memory, you are going to transfer data into the cache in terms of block. So you know that CPU is going to refer to, I require an address, that's a word that I want. So the bus that connects CPU and cache will transfer one word at a time. So what is one word? Inside the CPU, let's say my registers are of 32-bit, for example. My ALU is of 32-bit. That means I can perform 32-bit logical and arithmetic operations. The internal buses that connect various registers, they are all 32-bit. In that case, I call it as word length is 32-bit. That's called one word. Word length is 32-bit. So at any point of time, once I give the address to cache, the cache is going to return one word of data. That means the unit of transfer between cache and CPU is a word. Now, I'm going to define something known as a block, which consists of multiple words, word 0, word 1, word 2, like that, etc., up to word 7. So I have 8 words in a block. So when I transfer something from main memory into cache, I'm transferring in terms of a block. And the bus that connects between main memory, it can transfer only one word at a time. So sequentially in adjacent clock cycles, I am bringing adjacent words. So it will take multiple clock cycles to fill up a block in cache memory. So in short, main memory is logically divided into blocks. Cache memory also is logically divided into blocks. And data transfer between main memory and cache happens at the block level. Block is nothing but multiple words. Whereas data transfer between cache and CPU is at the word level, because at any point in time, CPU requires only a word. Now, why I am bringing, rather than bringing a word from main memory, why I am bringing in block? It takes lot of time to index into the main memory to locate where the place is. That is called the initial setup delay. Now, once I identify, let's say this is my block of data, then it is fast. I send the data one by one, word by word. So the initial delay, I wanted to amortize the cost by sending multiple ones. Okay. Now, why I'm sending block? Because as per spatial locality, say that if CPU asks now word number X, there is very high probability that CPU may ask for word number X plus 1 or X minus 1 or X plus 2 or X minus 2 in the near future. So it is always advisable that when word number X available in cache, and when you go to main memory, you bring a block of data where WX is present, such that the adjacent locations of WX is also been brought, keeping in mind that in the near future, there is a very high probability that WX plus 1 or WX minus 1 or plus 2 minus 2, this will be accessed. So that time I don't want them to be missed in cache. I can keep the data a priori. So these are all techniques that are being done in order to create an illusion. So you might have, let's say, you have saved some pictures in your folder, and then you are going to play and see the picture. It's a JPG picture. I'm not talking about slideshow. So when you pick a JPG picture, you just imagine that first picture, it may take sort of time. When you double click, it may take few seconds to load. So it's bringing from main memory into the cache. Then when you press the enter or a right arrow, then the next picture comes rather quickly compared to the first one. The third one also may be quick. After few, again you experience a little more delay. So what happened here is, this much is one block of data. When I experienced a miss or an absence of a data in the cache, at that time I went to main memory and I brought a bunch of data, which is known as a block of data. And as per spatial locality, they were referred and then they are kind of quickly shown, because that was a hit in the cache. After some time, whatever was the contents of the course, that was over. Now we are going to put up in a different way. So what happens here now? Since the content was over, I am going to incur one more cache miss. Again, I am bringing a block of data. So even though there is a small delay somewhere for the 9th picture, 9 to, let's say, 12 or 9 to 16 or 17, it may be again relatively quicker. That's the way how it has been done. So now some fundamental concepts. So block or line, they both are same. The term cache block and cache line are same. It's a minimum unit of information that can be either present or not present in the cache. So when you copy something from main memory, it is in terms of block. Now, hit, an access where data requested by the processor is present in the cache. That is what is known as a hit. So if when I give an address, if it is present in the cache, we call it as a hit. An access where data requested by the processor is not present in the cache, it is known as a miss. So hit time means the moment I give the address, the time to access the cache memory block and return the data to the processor. How much time it will take? Let's say I have a cache memory and from the processor, I am going to give an address of a word, and then that happened, let's say at T0. Now you are going to happen to T1. So T1 minus T0 is known as your hit time, the time to access the cache memory block and return the data to the processor. So at T0, I give an address. At T1, I get the word back in the processor. So the time spent between them is known as hit time. Now, hit rate, out of the number of access that I made, the number of hits, that is known as hit rate. So number of hits divided by number of memory access is known as hit rate. Number of misses. So whatever it is, a request that is given to cache, it will be either a hit or it will be a miss. Hit rate plus miss rate is equal to 1. So number of misses divided by number of memory access is known as miss rate. Now what is miss penalty? Time to replace a block in the cache with a corresponding block from the next level, that is known as miss penalty. So now consider you have a main memory now. So I supply T0, at T1 I'm going to get back. Let us say at T2, I come to know it's a miss. Your time starts now. So you go all the way to main memory, bring a block of data, fill it up. This extra, the additional delay, the moment they come to know it's a miss, going all the way to the next level in the memory hierarchy and returning them back to your L2, that is known as miss penalty. So the time to replace a block in the cache with corresponding block from the next level whenever a miss is occurring. So we learned about block and line, hit or miss, hit time, hit rate, and miss penalty components. Any queries in this? Anyone?
Sir,
Kapil? Yes.
There are multiple levels of cache, right? So this hit time
Yes.
and miss penalty, in which level are we talking about?
Each level, to whichever level you are talking. Let's say I'm talking about L1 cache. Hit time of L1 cache is the moment I get a request to L1 cache, when can I return a word when it is a hit. That is called hit time.
Okay, so for every
so L2
level,
cache may have its own hit time.
Okay, yes.
And miss penalty is defined. Where are you missing? On that level, you go to the next level, bring a block of data and bring it. That is miss penalty. Okay, someone else raised the hand. Kapil Jangir, I could see your hand initially.
Yeah, yes, sir. Sorry, sir. Accidentally.
Okay. So you have any doubt?
No, sir.
Okay, fine. So anyone else? Any query? Okay. So CPU cache interaction, the transfer unit between CPU register file and the cache. Let's say this is CPU registers. It has few registers. So I am transferring from the cache memory into the, during a load operation, you know that from an address. See, when you tell a load operation, load of R2, 8 of R1. This 8 of R1 will give an address. That address may be present in the cache. From there, I am loading into registers. So for example, for the time being, let us imagine that it's a 4-byte word. So one word equal to 32-bit. That is just an assumption. It varies from processor to processor. So the transfer unit between CPU and the registers, that will be always one word. That is the capacity of the bus that connect. So the tiny, very fast CPU register has room for 4-byte words. So for example, you assume you have 4 registers, R2, R3, R4, and R1. 4 registers. Each of them can accommodate 32-bit. Now the transfer unit between cache and main memory is a 4-word block. So I am transferring 16 bytes at any given point in time. 16 byte means I am bringing 4 bytes, and that is what is known as your lines, line 0, line 1. So each one can accommodate 16 byte, and that is nothing but 4 words. So from here, I am going to bring 16 byte is a unit of transfer from main memory to the cache, and 4 byte is a unit of transfer from cache to main memory. So the small fast L1 cache has room for 4-word blocks. The big slow main memory has room for many 4-word blocks. So I have many such blocks. At any point in time, I'm transferring the contents of one block into the cache. So only thing is you have to understand how this is being done. So 16 bytes are transferred from main memory to cache, not in single structure. Sometimes it may take multiple clock cycles to facilitate that, because it depends on the limitation of the bandwidth size. Now let us see general organization of a cache. A cache is an array of sets. So first what we tell is a cache may have multiple sets. So let us imagine there are S sets, capital S sets. It is defined as 2 power small s. So always it indicates that the number of sets in a cache will be a power of 2. Now, each set may have multiple lines or multiple blocks. That is also generally a power of 2. And each line has few bits. This is my data store, right? This is the data that I am storing. And each of this is cache line has a valid bit, and you have multiple bit which is known as a tag. So each set contains one or more lines, that is called E. Now each line can accommodate multiple bytes of data. This is what is known as your block, line or block. So that's also power of 2. So I will repeat, your cache memory organized as a array of sets. Each set has multiple lines. Each line has multiple bytes of data that I can store. So it is the tag bits is something stored along with a cache line and a valid bit, and some other bits are there. So basic bare minimum is a valid bit and a tag bit. Now, so the total cache size is going to be equal to B into, that is the block size, into E into E, we call it as associativity, E into S. S is the number of sets. All of them are power of 2. So naturally the cache size also would be a power of 2. So this is the general organization of a cache. Now how will CPU know whether something is present in cache or not? Cache is relatively very small when compared to the main memory. So whatever address CPU generates, it is called address as A. It is the address of the instruction or data. When it is present in main memory, we call it as physical address. Let us consider A as a physical address. Physical address is nothing but the address in the main memory. So let us assume whatever CPU is referring, it is present in the main memory. And if it is present in main memory, that address is known as the physical address or A. So what you need to do is, depending on the number of sets in the cache, I divide the address into tag, index, and offset. Remember, your S is equal to 2 power small s, your B equal to 2 power small b, and your E equal to 2 power small e. So if there are 4 sets, then I use 2 bits for index. If there are 512 sets, then I use 9 bits for the index. So this is your small s. The middle portion of the address will be S. I cannot know where is middle. This is going to be the offset. Offset portion is defined based upon the block size. If the block size is going to be 64 bytes, then the least significant 6 bit. Why 6? Because 64 is 2 power 6. So based on the block size, I identify the last B bits. After that, it is a set index bit. The balance is tag. So there is no specific number of bits for the tag out of the total address. How many bits should be there in the physical address totally? If I'm talking about a 4 GB RAM, then I have 2 power 32. That is 32 bits will be there in the index. Sorry, total 32 bits will be there in the total address. And if I'm going to talk about a cache memory with 64 sets and 256 byte is going to be my block size. So I will use 8 bit because 256 is nothing but 2 power 8. 8 bits for the offset. And 64 sets are there. So I use 6 bits for index. 8 plus 4 is 60. So 8 plus 6 is 14. So out of 32, 14 is gone here. Then the remaining 18 will be my tag bits. Now, how do you know whether something is present in the cache? So when CPU gives an address, you divide them into tag, index, and offset. The word at address A is in the cache if the tag bits of one of the valid lines in set index matches with the tag. This is a tricky portion. Whenever I get an address, I divide them into tag, index, and offset. Let us say the index value is something, let's say I'm using a 5-bit index. So index value is this. That indicate 7. So go to set 7. Let us imagine this is set 7. In the set 7, there will be multiple lines that is stored. In each of the line, you see wherever the valid bit equal to 1. These are all potential candidates. So in some places valid bit may be 0, so don't look them. Wherever valid bit is 1, you see the tag portion is same as the tag of the incoming address. If you gave the address, you know the first few bits are the tag. See whether the tag bits of the incoming address is same as the tag bits that is already saved in the cache line for a valid bit. If they are matching, then somewhere your data is here. Then how do you extract? This many bits. So if there are 6 bits, that means there are 64 bytes of data. So using this bit, I can know from where my word is starting. So if my last 6-bit value was going to talk about like this, that means from 8th byte onwards, you extract one word. So if one word is going to be 4 bytes, so byte number 8, 9, 10, and 11, this will constitute the word that CPU has asked for. I will repeat once again. From when an address is given by the CPU, when the physical address is given by the CPU, you divide the physical address into tag, index, and offset. Using the index bit, you locate the corresponding set. So my search is now restricted to only this set. Now, within the set, there may be multiple cache lines or cache blocks. Find out the one which are valid, the valid bit equal to 1, and there check the tag value. If the tag value of any of the valid cache line is matching with the tag value of the incoming address, then that indicates hit. Using the offset, you can find out the beginning of the word, and then you can extract the word. So the word content begin at offset bytes from the beginning of the block. So this is what we told. Locate the set index, locate the line in the set based upon the tag, check if the line is valid, locate the data in the line based upon the block offset. This is how you are going to replace it. So let us find out a small index and offset calculation. A cache has 512 KB capacity, 4 by 2 word, 64 byte block size, and 8-way set associativity. This set associativity is known as the value of E. The system is using 32-bit address. Given the address, I am giving the address in hexadecimal form 0xabca9984. Which set of the cache will be searched, and specify which word of the selected cache block will be forwarded if it is a hit in the cache. So what we have to understand that first we have to find out the number of sets in the cache. I am told that this cache memory has 512 KB capacity and 64 byte is the block size, and it is 8-way associative. The number of sets is defined by cache size divided by block size into associativity. 512 KB is 2 power 19 bytes. I would need to have numerator and denominator, everything going to be in same units. So let me convert everything into bytes. So 512 KB is 2 power 19 bytes divided by block size is 64 bytes, so 2 power 6. And associativity, it is 8-way associative, so 2 power 3. That will give you 2 power 10. That means I have 1024 sets beginning from 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. up to 1023. These are the set numbers. So once I know there are 1024 sets, 1024 is nothing but 2 power 10. So out of the physical address, 10 bits are gone for the index. And how many bits for the offset? It is 64 byte. So I will use 2 power 6 is 64. So 6 bit, the least significant 6 bit will go for offset. Next 10 bit is going for index. So index is 10, offset is 6, the remaining is 16. Total is 32 bit. So tag is 16 bit. Now in the offset, I'm telling each cache line has 64 bytes. Now, when I know that in the memory, let's say 4 byte together, memory is organized as bytes, main memory. So 4 byte together is my one word. So if I have total 64 bytes, then how many words are there? I have 16 words. So at regular interval of 4 byte, a new word is starting. So you have word 0, word 1, word 2 like that. So whatever is the 6 bit, let's say I'm going to have the 6 bit as A, B, C, D. Then the last 2 bits of the offset, they are bytes within a word. So ABCD is your word number, and these 2 bits are really don't care. There you put 0, 0, that is going to be the first byte, 0, 1, 1, 0, and 1, 1. These are the 4 bytes of a word. Now, let me put this. Let me erase few things so that it's clear. I'm giving the address. What is the address? 0xabc89984. I am going to write it in the hexadecimal version of it. Of what? ABCD, this one, this ABC8 is a hexadecimal value, that is 16-bit, that is my tag. The remaining 9984, 9, 9, 8, and 4, I am going to write. Out of it, 10 bits will indicate index. I am expanding only the red portion. And the next 4 bit will tell the word number, and the last 2 bit is going to be the bytes. So if you expand this, you get a value 614. And what is the word number? Word number 1. So if this address is coming to the cache, cache will split tag, index, and offset. And out of the 1024 sets, it will search only in set number 614. Set number 614 has 8 cache lines. In all the cache line, I see whether the tag value is equal to 0xabc8. Wherever it is matching, and then you see if the valid bit is equal to 1, then extract word number 1 from word number 1 onward. So how do you get word number 1? 0001, 0001, 10, and 11. So this is going to be the same. So 0001, 01, 0001, 10, 0001, 11. These are the 4 bytes that I need to send it to the CPU. Similarly, let's say it's a different address, 69AC, 485669AC. Again, same process. This is the index portion. It will give you set number 42, and the offset portion will give you word number 11. This is how you search in the cache. Now, when you design cache, a block can be placed in different position in cache. That is what is known as block placement. Now, how do you find a block if it is present in the upper level of the cache, whether it is present in L1 cache or not? That is called block identification technique. When there is a miss happens, which block will you replace so that I can give space to the newly incoming block? That is known as block replacement. And what happens on write? That is known as a write strategy. When there is a write I have to do, if it is a write miss, what will I do? So any cache memory design is involved with 4 design issues. How do I place? How do I identify? Which one to be replaced when there is a miss? And what will happen if there is a write operation? So consider this diagram in which I have a main memory which has 32 blocks. Now, block placement is also known as cache memory mapping. There are 3 types of mapping. First is known as direct mapped cache. So what I'll do is, let us say I want to bring the contents of block number 12 in the main memory to a direct mapped cache. Imagine your cache memory has only 8 block space. I can keep only 8 block or 8 cache line. If it is a direct mapped cache, what happens is this 12, I perform a mod operation on 8. I get the remainder as 4. Why 8? Because I have total of 8 blocks in my cache. It's a direct map. If it is a direct mapped cache, that means I can keep this 12 only in block number 4 of my cache. Similarly, if I bring 7, so 7 mod 8, that is equal to 7. So block 7 can be placed only in 7. Block 28, so 28 mod 8, that's going to be 4. So 28 also can be kept in 4 only. But already your 4 has 12. So 12 and 28 cannot exist together. Either 12 will be kept or 4 will be kept. This is called direct mapped cache. So direct mapped cache means there exists a predefined unique location where a main memory block can be present. And how do you find out? Main memory block modulo number of blocks in the cache memory. The other extreme is known as fully associated. So here you have a predefined space. Other one is called fully associative, where I can place the block number 12 anywhere wherever there is space available. So let's say you go into an office room where you can sit anywhere and work with your laptop. That is called fully associative. But there exists a predefined space for you that is known as direct mapped cache. Now, I am looking for a combination from these two. I divide the cache memory into sets, and each set has multiple cache block space. So I do the mapping only to a set. Within a set, I can keep it anywhere. So that is why block number modulo 4. Why 4? I have totally 4 sets, set 0, 1, 2, and 3. Let's say 12 mod 4 is equal to 0. So I can keep in set number 0. In 0, there are 2 cache lines. I can keep it anywhere. So what we saw now was actually a set associative cache. This is a two-way associative. So if I can divide the entire cache memory into sets where each set has 4 lines, we call it as 4-way associative, 8-way associative. Like that, associativity is also a power of 2. So cache memory block placement, we have a direct mapped cache which tells that block can be placed only in one location. How do you find it out? Main memory block, modulo, number of blocks in the cache. Second category is known as set associative cache, where a block can be placed in one among a list of locations. What do you do? Block number, modulo, number of sets. Third one is known as fully associative, where a block can be placed anywhere in the cache. So 3 category of cache memory mapping: direct mapped cache, set associative cache, and the fully associative cache. So direct mapped cache is the simplest kind of cache which is easy to build. You need to compare only one tag. So direct mapped cache means you have your associativity equal to 1. E equal to 1. Cache memory is divided into set. Each set has only one line, and whenever you get the address, so E is equal to one line. That's what it has been telling. So I need to compare only one tag from the address, whatever you get. So let us say this is the address given by CPU. Index bit say that 0001. So with that 00101 I have to do, I have to match to set number 1. And here what will I do? I see whether the tag value of the incoming address is same as the tag and valid equal to 1. If they both are same, then this is my data. And using offset, I can extract. So I have a limited comparison only that is to be done. So find a valid block in the selected set with a matching tag. So this is, for example, let us imagine once I am doing this is a selected set. Valid is equal to 1. Yes. Okay. This is the address that has been given, and the address is also matching. The tag bits in the cache line must match with the tag bits in the address. If they are matching, we call it as a hit. Once if hit happens, then I need to extract the corresponding block offset selecting from the byte. So this is 000, 001, 002 like that. This will tell your 4. So this is what I have to extract. This is my word. If one word is going to be 4 bytes. So I will repeat once again. Given the address, find out the set number. Using the set number, go to the corresponding set, check the valid bit, check the tag. If the tag is matching, extract the word using the block offset. So what happens? This is how a direct mapped cache looks like. These are the bytes, different words that you have stored. When CPU gives the address using the index bit, there is a decoder. You are going to uniquely go for one particular row in the cache. Check the valid line. Compare the tag value already saved there with the incoming tag, so that comparison is done. If that is hit and the valid bit equal to 1, that is known as a hit. Once if hit happens, you have a multiplexer here. This block offset acts as the select line. So they will extract their corresponding word. Direct mapped cache works like this. Now come to set associative cache. Here we are taking E equal to 2. 2 lines per set. It is characterized by more than one set. So what will you do? Once you get an address, let's say this is 0001, that will point to this set number 1. Now in set number 1, it can be either here or here. That's what I'm going to do. Let us consider a block matching is done by comparing the tag in each valid line in the selected set. Let us say this is the set that I'm talking about, set number I. So I have selected a set. It is two-way associative, so there are 2 lines that are saved there. Now how would I do? There is a tag portion. So I compare the tag in both these cases. Valid bit equal to 1 in both the case. Now I'll search the tag. The tag bit in one of the cache line must match with the tag bit in the address. So here it is 0110. This is 1001. That's not matching. This is 001. Yes, this is a match. So this is my hit. The first line and second line. Second line is a hit. That means your data is present somewhere here, and the block offset is 4. So from 4 onwards, you try to extract the corresponding word. This is what happened in set associative cache. So 1 and 2, and it's a cache hit. Word selection is done same as direct map to cache, but chosen only on the line that has produced a hit. If a cache hit, then block offset selects starting byte. This is how a set associative cache looks like. CPU is giving tag, index, and offset. Since it is two-way associative, I have two portions now. This is known as way 0, and this is known as way 1. So in both the sets, I perform parallelly using the index. I search here and here parallelly. Then I extract the tag value of way 0 and way 1 and compare with the incoming tag. If that is hit and the valid bit equal to 1, that indicates it's a hit. So hit will happen only in one place. Then accordingly, using the offset, it acts as a select line for the multiplexer. Data is extracted out from this. So there is a latch which will take off your data from here, from way 1. This will select from way 2, and appropriately you have to transfer the data. This is the concept of set associative. So this searching, both the sets happen parallelly. Now when it comes to fully associative, there is no set index. You will be having offset and tag only. So I have to search in every cache line whether there is a tag matching or not. This is tag matching. So wherever there is a hit, if the valid bit equal to 1, using the offset portion, I have to extract the data. So offset portion will tell you what is to extract. So tag has to match and then extract the data. So this is how block identification happens in fully associative. So how do you, out of the 4 design choices, how do you place a cache or place the contents inside a cache memory using direct map to cache, fully associative cache, and set associative cache? Now to index into the cache, how do you do it? Decoders are used for indexing. So once you get the address, this will tell you where to go. So more number of sets, it will take more time to decode. Indexing time depends on the decoder size. S is to 2 to the power of s. Smaller number of sets, less is indexing time. So if it's a small cache, means number of sets are less, it will take less time to index into the cache. Now why use middle bits as index? So we have tag, index, and offset. So this is the principle: tag, index, and offset. Now why I'm using these bits for indexing? Why can't that be tag? If I use higher order bits for index, had I using index, tag, and offset, let me not conclude about offset. If indexing and tag is like this, then adjacent memory lines would map to the same entry. See, this is my cache. So if I use the higher bits, I'm not using the offset bits now. If I use the higher bits for indexing, then adjacent blocks all would be mapped to the same cache line. Wherever you see this color, 0, 1, it will be mapped to the yellow. 1, 0, they'll be mapped to this blue, and 1, 1, they are mapped to this violet. So if adjacent memory lines will be mapped to the same one, that means I have to, once I read this, it will come to cache line 0. Then I wanted this, then I will take this out. So these two cannot coexist together. Only one of these pink line can be there in the cache. Whereas if I use lower bits for addressing, the middle bits for indexing into it, consecutive memory lines are mapped to different lines. This is called the last 2 bits, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, and 1, 1. They both will go to 4 different locations. So only these are the lines that are mapped into the same location in cache. So adjacent locations are mapped. So when I go with the program, that normally linearly the program is moving from here to here. When they reach yellow portion, that will be mapped to the second line in the cache. When they reach this blue portion, it will be mapped to this. So if there is a loop, and why I'm trying inside a loop here, all of them are in cache. So without much trouble, I can manage it. So that completes this first two elementary portion of the cache: block placement and block identification, and a little bit about indexing. There are 2 portions which has been taken. You start reading from introduction portion in the memory hierarchy design chapter in chapter 2, and then go to review of memory hierarchy section B1. So these 2 topics are good enough to understand today's lecture. So we will again see on Monday to continue with the next portion of the discussion in cache. And Tuesday I'm giving a break. Next Tuesday I'm out of town, so I won't be taking class. Next Monday we will continue with one more cache memory topic. So that's all for today. And with respect to any query in the first quiz, there is a form that is being floated. You might have already got an email. Correctly tell your query there, and if at all your query has any merit, we will update on it. Second quiz also, we will upload the scheme shortly, and then you will get the mark for that as well. Any queries?
Sir, what is the significance of valid bit in the cache?
Okay. So since cache memory is a semiconductor cell, when you bring something, so initially when you turn on the cache, the valid bit is equal to 0. That is same as cache memory contents are erased. So valid equal to 0 means cache memory is empty. That particular line is empty. If at any point of time, if you wanted to see, either the value will be 0 or the value will be 1. If you're talking about a flip-flop or a binary cell. How do you delete? Deleting doesn't mean changing the content to 0. Even 0 can also be a meaningful data. So valid bit indicates, if at all you wanted to delete something from cache, you make valid bit equal to 0. It is considered as, so once the valid bit is equal to 0, I cannot trust the remaining data portion. That is the meaning of valid bit. Or else there is no provision to understand whether this is currently correct or wrong.
Sir, similarly, why not then, if for index bits, why not we take the last position, like tag, offset and index? Then it would be more better.
Now, offset, if you look into, generally these are the adjacent locations in the main memory. The contents of a set. I am bringing a block of data from main memory. What is this block actually? Set of contiguous locations in main memory. That is what is called offset. So if offset is going to be the middle bits, then the contiguous locations in the main memory, they will be mapped to different sets in the cache. So what I want is, once I enter into a cache, then I have to continuously supply data from there rather than going into a different set. So continuous location in main memory, I wanted to preserve continuous location in cache, and that is possible only if the offset is LSB.
Okay, sir.
That is to facilitate spatial locality whenever, because I am sure that processor will ask for the adjacent location soon. So it's already present in the current set. I just wanted to transfer the next word. That's all. Any other question? Study cache memory thoroughly, because that is very important to understand the rest of the topics, the optimizations and multi-cores. And even for operating system course, memory management is completely on the basis of this cache memory concept. So study it well. Next semester is going to be offline as of now. So July onwards, like July end onwards, classes will happen in the offline manner. And subject course allocation is done. I will be handling the subject OS and OS lab. Myself and Dr. Venkatesh, we two are there. So these topics, computer architecture and organization concepts, is very well required to appreciate the contents of OS. Any other query to anyone? So kindly go through the video, the NPTEL course video also. The same topics are being covered there. Go through it and then try to work out the problems given at the end of the textbook. We will see on Monday again at 11 o'clock. Thank you. The class is over.